My name is Anju, A-N-J-U, meaning peace tree in Japanese, or also in Chinese, since the meaning is out of the symbol character. In this video, I would like to share my Kundalini awakening experience. A quick overview. So I'll go through the 7 stages of my Kundalini awakening. For me, the Kundalini awakening was not the result of any spiritual practice. It was more the result of a study in psychology, the human psychology, the human condition. Stage number 1, going down the gutter. Stage number 2, the studies in psychology, or we can call it the shadow work. Stage number 3, the liberation, the cracking open of this heart chakra. Stage number 4 would be what we call the Euphoric Stage. Stage number 5, the dark night of the soul. Stage number 6, the void. And stage number 7, stepping into the purpose or the life mission. So today I'll just go through the explanation of each stages without too many details, because I'm not trying to make this video too long. So let's start with stage number 1, down the gutter. So before the awakening, my life was pretty good. I had just moved to Colombia because living in Latin America was always my dream. Being from Canada, a very cold country, I always liked the tropical weather much better. So I was onto that, moved to Colombia. After a couple years, I purchased a little piece of land in the jungle, right by the river, with a big waterfall in the back. And I started living on my farm, back to the land style, with my mule, my chickens, walking to the village to get my supplies. Life was pretty good. It was a permaculture, living off the land type of project. And I wanted to organize and help the community there to organize ecotourism and have some tourists come and walk in nature. I was going to make a coffee brand out of my little coffee plantation and apply for a business visa with that. But then only 3 months after living on the farm, pandemic hit. It was actually great because I had to stay isolated and stay home, but my home was the whole property, and I was way isolated in the jungle anyway. So basically it was the perfect setup to spend pandemic isolation. But then what happened is that during the pandemic, the immigration closed for over 10 months. So I couldn't apply for my business visa. And when they reopened, they had changed all the requirements. So they put me through a whole turmoil trying to achieve all the new requirements. They made me do all sorts of crazy things and pay for all sorts of paperwork. And in the end, after almost 1 year of struggling with them, They just refused my business visa. And that's why I basically was obligated to leave Colombia. At the same time, I also got into a relationship that was fine in the beginning, but then became very toxic. And this just added to the chaos of the paperwork and the immigration struggles. Slowly but surely, everything became a big chaos. Nothing was working out, and I was vibrating so low, I was attracting more and more bad luck and bad treatments. I basically became everybody's easy target victim. By the time I had to leave Colombia, I had to leave everything behind, disorganized, big chaos, and some details I won't go into, but basically it was really bad. And that was me going down the gutter. And I basically came home in a complete traumatic state. So let's leave it at that, but a lot of hardship is often what happens to trigger a spiritual awakening. So it's pretty typical to have had my life destroyed and me going down the gutter to initiate the whole process of looking into what the heck was wrong with me. So anyway, there was also a big kind of incident that happened the last day before I left Colombia, and that's what really triggered that state of shock and total trauma I was in when I came back home to my mom's house. I actually stayed in that traumatic shock state for a whole month. I couldn't stop thinking about the incident. But anyway, from there started stage number 2, which was I decided to study psychology because of the shock state. And there was no psychologist available. So this is how it all started. I started studying post-traumatic symptoms on Google. And to my surprise, there was the whole list of mental health issues, basically, that was included in the list of post-traumatic symptoms. And then there wasn't really a specific solution to treat all these trauma symptoms. It was very vague, anyway. At the same time, I started looking into narcissism because my sister told me that my ex was a narcissist. And I realized that I didn't even know what a narcissist was. So I started reading all the stories about narcissistic abuse on Quora. And the more I read about these narcissistic abuse, the more I recognized everybody in there. Even myself. So I had to auto-diagnose myself as a narcissistic personality disordered angel. Then came along a PDF on a WhatsApp group, which was the 5 wounds of the soul, which doesn't allow you to be yourself. That's the title in Spanish or in French for the book of the author Lise Bourbeau. And this is when the process, I would say the magic process, really started. I became fascinated about this book and the information it had, and it was basically about childhood wounds and how to recognize it on your body. So this movement is called Listen to Your Body, and this put me in a fascinated, absorbed, passionate, altered state of being, basically, studying that book. And I realized that narcissism was basically the result of trauma. So it all revolved around post-traumatic symptoms. Then I watched a movie called The Encanto from Disney, with my little nephew. And that movie, funnily, out of synchronicity, also talked about trauma, which results in toxic behaviors, which results in no love, therefore a pinch of love, and everything is resolved. That's the story of the Encanto. And it's in Colombia, the country I just came back from. That's why my sister chose that movie for me to watch with my nephew. But that also put everything together, from trauma to post-traumatic symptoms to narcissism and toxic behaviors to the lack of love. Then came along on Facebook a 1-hour interview with the biologist from Australia, Jeremy Griffith. And that 1-hour interview was also oh so fascinating. I had to study it for 3 days. The 1-hour interview in 3 days. And he explains the human condition in such a scientific way. His book is called Freedom. And that freedom he's talking about is actually the liberation, the spiritual awakening. But he never mentions spiritual awakening. He just keeps it very scientific. But that was a big piece of the puzzle. And then I also had to understand that we don't understand what understand means, or basically what's in the unconscious or the subconscious versus what's in our conscious mind. And that was the last piece of puzzle. So this whole process was basically divinely orchestrated on me, because I didn't choose any of the information, but everything came along, one thing after the other, completing the information. And this whole process lasted for 2.5 months, where I was basically in that altered state of mind, altered state of being, I would say, because I was so passionate, so fascinated, I couldn't do anything else. I didn't want to go out. I would only sit on the balcony or wherever and study, and all these questions kept popping out, and all these reflections kept going deeper and deeper into realizing my narcissistic behaviors, my toxic family systems, and relationships altogether. And I wouldn't even sleep. I barely slept for 2.5 months.
And we're not even that bad, actually. Like me and my family, the last thing we would think is that we have some toxic behaviors. I mean, we're all really good people, actually. Just like the Madrigals from the Encanto movie. We're just post-traumatic people. That's what it is.
And understanding that my heart was blocked, that I did not feel any emotions, therefore I didn't know what love was. That's what they say about narcissists, that they don't know what love is because their heart is blocked and they block all emotions. So I was doing this exercise about trying to feel an emotion. And that's when, on the 21st of September 2022, right for solstice, equinox, my heart chakra cracked open. And this is stage number three, the Kundalini awakening. Except that I didn't know anything about spiritual awakenings or Kundalini awakening. So I thought the weight came out of me, and I miraculously got cured of my childhood wounds. So stage number 3, the awakening, was like 3 waves of energy that came out of my shoulder, my left shoulder. And that went up in the sky. I could see it. It was like a blur. in the sky, flying upwards. But I knew that came out of me, that came out of my shoulder. And as this was happening, I felt so alleviated. And that happened 3 times, 3 waves of energy shooting out of me and alleviating me. And then I felt so calm. And I thought, wow, I just cured from my childhood wounds. But then later, like a whole week later, I figured out that this was actually a Kundalini awakening. So then, stage number 4, the Euphoric Stage, was like me being so happy that I cured from my childhood wounds. I didn't feel any kind of resentment. I had forgiven everything, and all these revelations were coming in about unconditional love and just loving yourself and loving everybody, and everything was so fantastic. My tongue was not in my pocket. I was telling everybody about it. Then I was discovering that I had awakened. So then I was telling everybody about that, and nobody understood. Everybody just thought that I'd gone crazy. At the same time, I was feeling such a bliss in my heart. At one point, I thought I was gonna have to become a monk and go sit in my bliss for the rest of my life in a monastery. Like, I seriously thought about that for a minute. Like, everything is in the unknown. I didn't know what to expect about all this. Discovering all this was just very confusing, even for me. But at the same time, I was so eager to share it with everybody, but nobody would support me. So during that period, I also was for 2 weeks, I had another little soul boot camp where I became like really fascinated and passionate about studying more and more things. And it made me do like a round the world study of all the manipulations in this world and the hidden stuff. So it went from the Illuminati to the Hollywood to the way the borders are manipulated, the way the languages are manipulated, the way the Bible has a bunch of hidden information in it, and also horrific things like child trafficking or blood plasma. Blood plasma. That's a documentary that came about how they buy the blood from poor people in the neighborhoods, mainly in the US, and they take that plasma part of the blood to use for very advanced pharmaceuticals in Europe. So that's one that I didn't know about. So that round of the world, manipulation in the world, soul boot camp was for about 2 weeks. But the whole euphoric state, I could say, lasted for 2 months or a little bit more, up until I moved to Peru. Because during that time also came along the channeled messages, and the channeled messages were all about galactic and aliens and great awakening of humanity and starseeds on a mission. So all these stories, when I started sharing that with my family, by then my family thought I completely lost it. So they were ready basically to send me to psychiatric hospital. So I said, okay, I'm done, I'm leaving. And synchronistically, old friend from Peru, which is maybe my twin flame, who knows, called me up. And he was actually saying that he awakened since 2012. So I said, wow, you must know a lot about spiritual awakenings. I'm coming to Peru so we can talk about this. So this is how I decided to move to Peru, end of November 2022. And little did I know is that the next phase of the awakening that started then was going to be the dark night of the soul. So So stage number 5, the dark night of the soul, started then. And to me, it wasn't as dark as the studies in psychology, which made me realize how narcissistic and toxic my whole life was. So that part was understood. And so the dark nights weren't so dark. It was just about being exhausted, basically. So what they explain is that this is purging all the trauma that was accumulated inside your body, so you need to get that out. And to get that out is a very heavy process on your body, and that's why I'd be so tired, exhausted. So I basically spent like 7 months sleeping, all day, all night, just sleeping all the time. And when I was up, I would just listen to my channel messages from the Galactic Federation and getting all my information and trying to figure out more and more and more about this awakening that just happened. So yeah, a lot of magic in this story. It basically seems like it just happened like magic, and I had to figure everything out after the fact, without knowing much about any spirituality, basically. And basically the awakening didn't have much to do with spirituality. It was more about understanding the human condition and the human psychology and the toxicity in our society. So slowly, I moved from the dark night of the soul to stage number 6, which is the void. So the void is like me starting to get a little bit more energy, me thinking that I've slept enough, I should maybe get back to life, and me not knowing how to get back to life. So what am I supposed to do now with this awakened state? And yeah, I'm supposed to go on to my mission, but what is that mission? All that confusion and not knowing what to do. I didn't even know if I was going to go back to my project in Colombia or not. Now I kind of know that I will, but I don't still know when. And yeah, so that's kind of mixed with a little bit more dark night and purging and more traumas, kind of little details coming up to be treated and released, taken care of and released.
Also releasing a whole lot of programming and fears, fear of lack, and then learning to apply that unconditional love to myself. No judging, no criticizing, accepting and surrendering, even in the awful state I was, completely unproductive.
Along with, trying to live some events of life and going through all these different, experiences or just like things of life that makes these new things to work out come up. Up until just recently, I was still purging about being a caretaker and a self-sacrificer and really accepting to put myself first and things like that. So there was still more and more lessons coming up as I was going through this void where I'm trying to figure out what to do next with my life. But Peru has been a very good place to go through this process. It's quite easygoing and inexpensive, so I can afford to just sacrifice my savings and focus on this awakening process. So since 2 years, my life has been 100% dedicated and focused on this awakening process, and I haven't really been able to do anything else. except maybe for starting this YouTube channel. Barely starting this YouTube channel. So now what's the mission? Stage number 7. Just living life. Getting back to life, but in the new state. So, yeah, I'm just starting to have enough energy, slowly coming out of this void, I think. I was able to go to the beach for my birthday. I would have probably not went yet if it wasn't for my birthday. I put a date on it to obligate myself to make a move and go to the beach, because I've been wanting to go for months and I just didn't feel like I could do it. I was kind of crummy, scared, really weird state. This void has taken, this whole awakening has taken like my life force away, basically. No life force. Unable to do anything. Completely disabled for over 2 years.
And I haven't even mentioned any of the actual physical pains and symptoms I had to go through throughout the whole process. But I'll keep that for another separate video though.
So it hasn't been easy, to say the least. And I'm still taking it slow. And we'll see what happens. So this channel at least is started, and it's gonna come along on my new life, my new beginning. But I can definitely say that my old self is gone. I know that I'm gonna be the same person, but with a whole different way of approaching, especially relationships and dealing with people and dealing with myself, actually. So yeah, it does feel great now. Looking forward to see what happens with this great awakening of humanity. I can only hope it's gonna go well. So anyway, that's my story so far. I'll leave it at that. With much love and a great journey to you all. I'll talk to you in the next one.